Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2024 GMC Canyon, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster base plate kit with removable arms. Before we do that though, let's take a minute, we'll check this out and make sure it's going to be the best setup for you. I would like to address one of the big questions that a lot of people ask in regards to being able to set up their Canyon to be flat towed down the road. And that's, what parts am I going to need? And there's 5 main components or major components. You'll have your base plate, the tow bar, your safety cables, your diode wiring, and a supplemental braking system. And then there's a few other things I like to recommend for the Canyon, one of them being a battery charge line kit. With these Canyons, you also have to disconnect the battery when you flat tow. So I like to use the automatic battery disconnect switch. And then depending on what braking system you end up going with, for example, one of the stay and play duos like we have here today, or the Roadmaster InvisiBrake, you may need to pick up a Roadmaster stoplight switch as well. With that out of the way though, let's talk base plates. So if it were me and I personally was setting up a Canyon to be flat towed, this is the one I would go with. I think it looks awesome. It's super easy to use. And so you really can't go wrong. You know, with these removable arms here, I'll pull these out. So kind of show you what it looks like when you're not going to be hooked up. That's what you're going to see. And I think it's great. What was here originally was just some factory tow hooks. So the base plate is going to replace those. So it doesn't really look out of place by any means. You know, there was already something there, just replacing it with the base plate openings. And the kit's also going to come with some brackets too, which I find really convenient. You have one up here, which will allow you to mount up your wiring connector, and then one over here on the passenger side, which will allow you to mount up your breakaway switch. So because of how all this is set up, you know, you're not going to have to chop up the front of your truck and make openings to get all these parts to fit. They just utilize the openings that are already there from the factory. So really convenient. Whenever you are ready to hook up though, you know, these removable arms will slide right into the base plate, lock in, and give you that attachment point that you're going to need to hook your tow bar up. Now with that said, usually we like to be hooked up to the coach, and so we can really effectively demonstrate, you know, how this would work. But bad weather today, so bear with us here. Trying to make do. But with these style of arms, these are going to work with the vast majority of the Roadmaster tow bars, the direct connect tow bars, and even some of the other manufacturer brands of tow bars. So for example, let's say maybe you really like a Blue Ox tow bar, or you already have a different brand of one. Chances are really good that there's adapter ends available that'll let you swap those ends out and let that different tow bar that you have pair up with this particular base plate. As far as the fitment goes, this is going to work with pretty much all of the Canyons out there, with a couple of exceptions. The AT4X models, the ones that are kind of more designed for off-road and stuff like that, this base plate is not going to fit those, and it's also not going to be compatible if your truck happens to have the undercarriage camera system. So definitely, you know, that's the minority of these trucks out there on the road. So the regular AT4 like we have here today, the Denali's, you know, the more base model type ones, this base plate will fit. So you should be in pretty good shape. But other than that, at the end of the day, can't go wrong. You know, it's easy to use, looks good. You don't have to tear up the front of your truck, cutting holes and everything to get it to fit. So can't really ask for too much more. As far as the installation goes, it wasn't bad by any means. Actually getting the base plate itself in place and installed was pretty easy. Utilizes a lot of the factory attachment points that are already there. I'd say the most difficult part was just getting the fascia removed. You know, everything's pretty tight, a lot of plastic, so just take your time, be careful. You should be in pretty good shape, and hopefully, you know, I can show you a couple tips along the way to make it a little bit easier. If this is something you don't feel like dealing with or don't have the time, completely understand that. You can always check out our dealer locator network, and that can hopefully get you going in the right direction as far as finding a shop that can handle this for you. But if you're doing it yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Canyon, and you can go ahead and pop the hood. We're going to have to remove our front fascia, and so we'll start with removing the 4 fasteners up along this edge here. So we'll have 2 on each side. The fasteners are going to be T15 Torx bit styles. So we'll grab our bit here, get them both removed, and from this point on, whatever we do to one side of our truck, we'll also do to the other side because it'll be set up the same way. Moving underneath the front of our vehicle, on each side, we're going to have 3 T15 Torx bit screws. So go ahead and pull those out. Moving to your wheel wells now, we're going to have more Torx bit screws. Along the edge, we're going to have a total of 5 of them, and it definitely helps if you turn your wheel in or out one way or the other to give you more room. But we'll go ahead and just work our way up here and get all these pulled out. This one up here is kind of tricky to see. You'll just have to kind of go by feel. Further down in the wheel well, there's going to be 4 more T15 fasteners. Get them all removed here. Once you get all those removed, you can take your fender liner and just kind of pull it out up till about there. Since we're going to be working in this area, kind of prying on it, I took some painter's tape, put it around the seams, that way we don't scratch anything up. But we're going to have to partly remove this fender trim here, and so if you kind of just start to pull down and out on it, there's some fasteners behind there, and they're kind of hard to get to be honest. So you can just work your way around, and then if you come in from the back, you can get to a couple of them. Once I get this more free, I'll show you what I'm talking about here. You can pull out on it, and what I was doing, this push pin, you come in from the back, you can kind of squeeze it with your fingers while you're pulling out on it. That'll allow it to release. We can just work our way up here. And as we go, and as you get this removed further and further, you can continue to kind of work the wheel well liner back to allow you to get your hand in there and actually get to those fasteners. You want to remove your wheel well trim to about here. I just took a piece of foam, kind of stuffed it in there to help keep it pulled away from our vehicle. And we're doing this that way we can get access to this fastener right here. And we're going to go ahead and remove that. It is also a T15 Torx bit head. Super tight, so as long as you can kind of break it loose, and then you can usually just grab your bit with your hand and get it completely removed. Back in the wheel well, if you just continue to kind of push your liner out of the way, that will expose these 2 T15 screws right here, holding the fascia to this bracket. So we'll pull both those out. Just over here on the passenger side, we're going to have an electrical connector that we need to disconnect. Depending on your model, you may have two, another one right next to it, but we just have this one. So what I'm gonna do is take a little trim tool. There's a push pin kind of holding it in. I'll release it. And then to disconnect this, there's a red tab. You push down on it, and then if you kind of push them together more and push down on the center there, you can release it. Moving to the front of our vehicle, on each side here, inside of these little openings, back a little ways, you're gonna have a 10mm head bolt. So if you grab an extension and of course your socket, what I like to do in the socket is take a little paper towel, put it in there. That way it'll kind of grab the bolt, and when we go to remove it, way less likely to fall out and get lost. So that's what we're gonna do. Here's a better look at that fastener, and we'll do what we talked about here. Definitely have to kind of finesse it out. If you do drop it, it's not a huge deal, but probably easier just to do it this way. Now with an extra set of hands, what you can do, once you kind of start working everything apart, you can grab the corner of the fascia here and get to about this point on each side. And you'll work everything free. You can get our fascia removed and set off to the side. When you are pulling this fascia off, it's going to be kind of tight. That's why we were working it back and forth to kind of loosen everything up. And, you might have to take, a little bit of pressure. Ours came off relatively easy, but you might have to pull straight on it. And that's because there's a lot of clips, plastic fasteners kind of all over the place that are holding this on. If a couple of them end up staying on the front of the vehicle, you want to remove them. I'm just taking a pair of pliers, kind of squeezing them in, pulling them out, and then you want to reinstall them back on the fascia, right? That way when we go to put the fascia back, they'll be connected already and actually slide right into place. We can get our tow hooks removed now, and there's two bolts holding in. Of course, you got a nut on the other side. And we're going to use an 18mm wrench to hold the nut from spinning. And an 18mm socket. Pull those out. We'll go ahead, get our tow hooks removed, as we will not be reinstalling them. If your truck happens to have the shutters on the lower grille like ours does, you will have to remove this fastener here on each side. It's a 7mm and pretty tight, so you almost have to use a box wrench here to get it removed. Can remove our bumper beam now. So on each side you have three 15mm head bolts. And I got the three on the other side out already, so when you go to take this last one out, make sure you support it a little bit. You should be able to work this off and set it to the side. Looks like in our case, actually, we'll have an electrical connector we need to disconnect. So ideally you do this beforehand, but this is something I missed. I'm just going to put a bolt back in to keep this supported so I can get to this here. This connector is similar to the other one. There's a red tab. I'm just using a small screwdriver because it's pretty small there, but push down on the center and release it. We should be able to get this removed. I just pulled those other two out that I put back in. And we'll completely remove it from our truck here. Take our base plate now, and these are side specific, so make sure to check your instructions, make sure you got the right one, but pretty easy way to tell. The safety chain opening there, that should be facing towards the outside of the truck. These two holes are going to line up with these two holes where our tow hooks originally were. Slide that in place, and then you'll take your factory tow hook bolt, and they give you a flat washer. Go ahead and put that on. Push it through. Same thing here. We can move to the outside of the bolt where we can get the rest of our hardware on. We'll take another flat washer and then the factory nut and just get it started a couple of threads for the time being. Be sure now to take some red Loctite and put it on the threads of the hardware. And we're going to use red Loctite for all of the fasteners that we're going to use to secure the base plate, and I'll tighten them up pretty much all the way by hand. And what I'm looking to do here, because the bumper beam is more or less going to sandwich a base plate into position, and if we just blindly tighten it down, you know, the holes might not line up as good as we want them to. So ours are off just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is take a pry bar and hold it into position like that, and then snug up those tow hook bolts. And that way everything will stay in position, making it easier to get our bumper beam and those fasteners back in. We'll grab our bumper beam. Of course, once you get both sides of your base plate on, line this back up. Take that factory hardware, put your Loctite on it, and we'll get all of them started hand tight. With everything in, you can take your 15mm and snug all the hardware down. Want to make sure to come back with a torque wrench now and torque all the hardware down to the amount specified in the instructions. I'm going to start with the bumper beam bolts, and then we can change your sockets and do these factory tow hook bolts there. Now that we have everything torqued down, what I've done is came back and put those 10mm head bolts back in that we removed when we had the fascia on. Just easier to get to now, you know, with it out of the way. I plugged our electrical connector back in for our lower shutters and reinstalled those two 7mm head screws. And at this point, it'd be a great time to you know, start setting up some of your other flat towing components, like your braking system or your wiring. And I say it because with the fascia removed, you know, we have a lot more room to work. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And once we have that wrapped up, we can, you know, revisit this and work on getting the fascia reinstalled. I got our other components installed on the front of our truck, and now we're ready to get the fascia reinstalled. They do give you this electrical bracket here, which is pretty convenient. I'm going to utilize it. It's going to be on the driver's side and go through that opening there. And so we'll remove these two screws. This is 7mm head. Put that in place. And then simply just re-secure the screws. When you set up your other components, particularly your diode wiring, and if you're doing a charge line, make sure when you route those wires over here to put them through the bracket, you know, before you get your fascia completely put back on, and to make sure you give yourself plenty of length to work with too. So just kind of a tech tip there. So we'll get that set up here. Get the fascia put back into place and re-secured the opposite way that we removed it. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster crossbar style base plate kit on our 2024 GMC Canyon.